I never doubted Gabriel's love for me. On our 5th wedding anniversary, to celebrate this special day, Gabriel bought all the fireworks and roses in the city. As fireworks lit up the night sky and roses covered our estate, he gently kissed the corner of my lips and said with deep affection, "Lily, I love you, till death do us part." However, the next day, I saw Isabella, a scholarship student Gabriel was sponsoring, carrying a limited edition handbag identical to mine on Instagram. Out of curiosity, I commented, "Isabella, are you sure you weren't scammed?" Soon after, Gabriel called me, berating me harshly. "Why are you scaring Isabella for no reason? The poor girl has been crying for hours because of you." Isabella grabbed the phone and apologized tearfully. "I'm sorry, Lily. I won't carry the same bag as you anymore." I could hear Gabriel's continuous words of comfort on the other end of the line. I knew then that this man's heart had changed. When Gabriel stepped through the front door, I had just returned from the luxury authentication service. This day was the day after our 5th wedding anniversary. It should have been a time of lingering sweetness, but I had encountered news that struck me like a bolt from the blue. It turned out that the limited edition handbag Gabriel had given me on our anniversary was a high-quality fake, and the man who had sworn his undying love to me just yesterday had given the authentic one to his scholarship student. If it weren't for that unexpected phone call, I would never have imagined that Gabriel, who claimed he was going to work, would be by his scholarship student's side. "Honey, what are you thinking about? What do you want to eat today? I'll cook for you." He still spoke to me in that doting tone, as if everything was normal, ready to comply with my every request. The high-powered CEO coming home to cook for his wife should have been a heartwarming scene, but I felt a mix of emotions. After a moment's hesitation, I finally declined Gabriel's offer. "Never mind, I don't have much of an appetite." Hearing this, Gabriel immediately crouched down in front of me, his face showing a hint of apology. "Honey, is it because of what happened with Isabella today? I'm sorry for my bad attitude earlier. I only spoke harshly because I saw Isabella crying so hard. Can you forgive me just this once?" He had gotten so angry at me for the sake of a scholarship student. In the past, I might have forgiven him, but now I realized that whenever Isabella was mentioned, Gabriel became talkative and interested. Isabella did really well in her exams this time and even won a national scholarship, so I rewarded her with a bag. At this point, Gabriel glanced at me cautiously, afraid I might notice something amiss. "But don't worry, honey, her bag is fake. The real one is with you." I kept a straight face, but my heart felt heavy. He assumed I wouldn't authenticate the bag, so he lied to me without hesitation. I wonder how many times he's deceived me over the years. Seeing no reaction from me, Gabriel went to the kitchen and busied himself preparing a table full of delicious dishes. Unfortunately, every dish was sprinkled with a layer of green onions, making it difficult for me to eat. Gabriel placed a piece of spare rib in my bowl and said softly, "Honey, why aren't you eating? Have some spare ribs. Eat some green onions. They'll make you smarter." I sighed deeply in my heart. This phrase was something Isabella had said. In the first year we sponsored her to celebrate her admission to college. Gabriel and I took her out for dinner. Because I'm allergic to green onions, I never touch them. Isabella had playfully said, "Eat more green onions to become smarter." Gabriel had strongly agreed with this statement, and over the years we'd been together, green onions hadn't appeared in our home for a very long time. If Gabriel hadn't mentioned it today, I would have almost forgotten about this incident. It seems he must have had many meals with Isabella over the years, to the point where he had forgotten about my allergy to green onions. "Gabriel, you forgot I'm allergic to green onions." His face suddenly showed panic, as if he had just remembered something and snapped back to reality. Looking at the table full of dishes sprinkled with green onions, his face couldn't hide the fluster. "Honey, look at my memory. I was so busy with work today that I completely forgot about this. I'm such an idiot." He slapped himself on the face several times without holding back. "I'll make you a new batch right away." In the end, I wearily stopped him. "Forget it, I'm not hungry anyway. Let's just leave it." He kept saying he was too busy with work, but Gabriel seemed to have forgotten that he hadn't even gone to the office today. After he made that phone call to me, I asked Gabriel's assistant. The fact I got was that Gabriel hadn't gone to the office all day, but had spent the entire day with Isabella. Yesterday was our wedding anniversary, and today he went on a date with his scholarship student. He must have been really worried that Isabella would get jealous and angry. I returned to the bedroom somewhat absent-mindedly and just lay down on the bed to rest. Gabriel followed me closely. He carefully massaged my neck. His technique was practiced, and it felt very comfortable. I have severe cervical spondylosis. Every time it flares up, my whole body aches and feels uncomfortable. Gabriel, concerned for me, had specially learned this massage technique from many traditional doctors to alleviate my cervical spondylosis attacks. "Honey, are you angry?" he asked. For a moment, I didn't know how to voice my thoughts. After all, these were just my suspicions, without any concrete evidence. "No, I'm just not feeling well," I replied. Gabriel looked at me with furrowed brows for a long while, his hands continuing their motions. Suddenly, he slipped his hand under the hem of my dress, slowly exploring upwards, a pleased chuckle escaping his throat. "I learned some new tricks last time. Shall we give them a try today?" Unfortunately, I wasn't in the mood for such honeyed games. I grabbed his increasingly invasive hand. "Another time. I really don't feel well today. I want to rest early." Gabriel's brow finally relaxed a bit. He didn't seem to mind my rejection. "Then let me help you take a bath and give you a good massage before you rest." After the massage and bath, as I lay drowsily in the bathtub, Gabriel gently carried me to bed, then quietly went to the bathroom himself. Before leaving, he took his phone with him. I wasn't sleeping deeply and could hear his low laughter. Even with the sound of the shower, it couldn't completely mask his joyful groans. That kind of sound was something Gabriel only made when we were intimate. I instinctively moved closer to the bathroom, pressing my ear against the door. "Isabella, you're so tender. What's the use of being tender if there's nowhere to use it?" "Gabriel, I prepared a surprise for you. Are you sure you're not coming over?" I could almost see Gabriel swallowing hungrily. My hands and feet turned ice cold, and I suddenly stumbled, scraping a layer of skin off my knee as I fell to the floor. Gabriel was startled by the sound. I hurriedly ran back, pretending to have fallen out of bed in my sleep. That man, his face still flushed from his recent pleasure, rushed over and picked me up from the floor, looking somewhat worried. "Honey, how can you be so careless? You're a grown woman. How can you fall out of bed?" Despite my efforts to hide it, Gabriel still noticed my knee, which was red red and bleeding. He anxiously went to get the first aid kit. I wanted to tell him not to bother, but just then, his phone rang. Gabriel instinctively turned away from me, but even so, I could still see his shoulders shaking with laughter. Okay, I'll be right over. Gabriel put the first aid kit by my feet. Honey, there's something at the company I need to handle. You wait at home, and when I'm done, I'll take you to the hospital to check your wound. He finally couldn't resist anymore. He found an excuse and left. His heart was no longer with me. Gabriel was very clever. In our 5 years of marriage, he had deceived me countless times, but I had never once deceived him. But this time, even such an obvious and clumsy lie from me could fool him. I waited all night, but Gabriel never came back. After thinking for a while, I took out my phone and called my best friend. Help me draft a divorce agreement. When she heard the news of Gabriel's infidelity, my friend was shocked. Lily, are you sure you're not mistaken? Gabriel, of all people, cheating? I was also very unwilling to believe this fact, but it was all true. Except for me, Gabriel had always kept his distance from other women. Once, when a receptionist at the company tried to seduce him, she was transferred to Africa the very next day. My friends had often envied me, saying I had found a good husband, but now it seems he had just hidden it very, very deep. Lily, I think you should consider this carefully. After all, divorce is not a small matter. We should have evidence. The evidence of infidelity, of course, would be catching them in the act. I knew where Isabella's dorm was. I also knew that Gabriel had rented an apartment near her school to make it easier for Isabella to study. At the time, I had argued with Gabriel about this. She's just your scholarship student. Don't you think you're treating her too well? Gabriel accused me of having no sympathy, saying I was cold-hearted. Honey, you're too unfeeling. Isabella has already suffered so much. Since we have the ability, we should help her more. She even has to work part-time on weekends. What if she comes back to school late and the dorm is closed? At least this way she has a place to stay. I often felt guilty, thinking my awareness wasn't high enough. Now I see. It was just to give them a good place to meet. I drove to Isabella's school, but after circling around several times, I couldn't find any trace of them. I couldn't even see Gabriel's car. Until the wound on my knee started hurting more and more, I had to go back home. In the underground parking lot, I found that Gabriel's car had already returned. But when he came home and didn't find me, he didn't even call me. Just as I was about to press the elevator button to go upstairs, faint sounds came from the nearby stairwell. The sound was somewhat familiar, and I instinctively walked in. In the dim light, there were two figures intertwined. You little vixen, you're ambushing me now? Wasn't 3 times last night enough for you? How could 3 times be enough? I want to drain you dry, so you can't even keep that old hag company when you go home. The shadows on the ground clearly showed Gabriel spanking Isabella's bottom hard. I stood frozen in place, as if struck by lightning. Gabriel's voice suddenly turned very cold. I've warned you not to let my wife find out about all this. Isabella didn't take it to heart at all, quickly wrapping herself around Gabriel's neck. Don't worry, Gabriel. I saw Lily's car isn't here. She must not be home. Gabriel quickly got back into the mood. You'd better behave. Apart from the position of Mrs. Gu, I can give you everything else. Otherwise, I won't let you off easy. How will you not let me off? Unable to get out of bed for 3 days? Or 7 times? You little vixen, you dare to provoke me. Soon, the shadows began to produce rhythmic collision sounds. After that, I couldn't bear to listen anymore. I went home in a daze, sitting blankly on the sofa. Suddenly my phone flashed. It was a message from an unknown number. Lily, you saw everything just now, didn't you? Why do you think Gabriel loves me so much? He can't even leave me. If I were you, I'd divorce him as soon as possible. You can still save some face. Otherwise, when you're kicked out in the end, you won't even have any dignity left. I gripped my phone tightly, my face cold and expressionless. Isabella, you homewrecker. You're really shameless. The unloved one is the mistress. Lily, do you think you can compete with me for a man with that old face of yours? I'm better than you in knowledge, looks, and figure. The only thing you're better at is having old bones. How can someone like you be worthy of being Gabriel's wife? Moreover, I'm already pregnant with Gabriel's child. My mind suddenly went blank. Isabella was pregnant, so she has more right to marry Gabriel than me? If we're talking about status and position, I indeed don't have the qualifications to marry Gabriel. I only gave him a hand when Gabriel was at his lowest point. I lent him a sum of money to tide him over, but he also put half of the company's shares in my name. I originally didn't want this half of the shares. It was him who, countless nights and days, held me and whispered sweet nothings. Lily, what's mine is yours. You must accept this half of the shares. I didn't think much of it, and never imagined I would come to this day with Gabriel. When Gabriel came back, he saw me sitting on the sofa in a daze and quickly panicked. He hurriedly hugged me, asking over and over again, honey, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell somewhere? Smelling the pungent female perfume emanating from Gabriel's body, I could no longer hold back the nausea rising in my stomach and ran to the bathroom, vomiting until I was dizzy. Until I threw up bile, I finally felt a bit better. Looking up, my pale face appeared in Gabriel's eyes. He was terrified and, without saying a word, prepared to carry me to the hospital. But at this moment, his phone suddenly rang. The face that was just terrified immediately broke into a smile. He hurriedly sent a message. Gabriel put me on the sofa and prepared to leave in a hurry. Honey, something urgent came up at the company. Wait for me. I'll be right back. He didn't even wait for my response before leaving. Even now, he's still lying to me. I had clearly seen that the person messaging him was Isabella. Gabriel, I think I'm pregnant. Really? I'm going to be a father? Isabella, wait for me. I'm coming right over. I slowly looked around, my face gradually turning cold. So many years of love, ultimately wasted. The facts were right in front of me. I no longer held any hope. This position of Mrs. Gu, whoever wants it can take it. I had my friend send over the divorce agreement. That bastard Gabriel dares to cheat. He should be left with nothing in the divorce. The clause about leaving him with nothing was eventually changed. I only wanted what was rightfully mine, not wanting to have any more entanglements with Gabriel. After packing all my belongings, I sat quietly on the sofa waiting for Gabriel to come back so we could have it out. But I waited for a long time and there was no news from Gabriel. During this time, I called him many times, but none of the calls went through. Later, Isabella sent me a photo. Gabriel was accompanying Isabella for a prenatal checkup, unable to hide the smile on his face. Lily, stop struggling. Do you still think you can turn things around now? Let me tell you, whoever has the child is the winner of this battle. Gabriel can only be mine. You're destined to be my stepping stone. I ignored Isabella Isabella and headed straight to the hospital. Since Gabriel wouldn't come home, I'd go find him. Perhaps it was just a coincidence. I had barely entered the hospital lobby when I saw Gabriel and Isabella. Isabella was clinging to Gabriel's arm like a little wife. Seeing me, Gabriel hurriedly distanced himself from Isabella. He was so flustered that he didn't even notice when the pregnancy ultrasound report fell from his hand. I picked up the report, curiosity briefly flashing across my face before settling back into calmness. Congratulations, Gabriel. You finally have a child. In that second, I saw a mixture of shock and fear in Gabriel's eyes. These emotions quickly turned to anger. He hadn't expected me to suddenly appear at the hospital. Lily, you don't trust me, so you followed me? He accused. I hadn't expected Gabriel to be so skilled at turning the tables. Although I had come specifically for him, I didn't say it directly. Let's not talk about whether I followed you or not. Even if I did, so what? You cheated and had a child behind my back, and you still dare to talk about me trusting you? Gabriel's face turned ashen, but he couldn't say a word. Moreover, if I had been following you, I wouldn't have only appeared now. But it seems the timing is just right to witness Mr. Gu's passionate love affair with this mistress, and celebrate Mr. Gu's joy at having a son. By the way, it seems Mr. Gu has never spoken a word of truth to me. It seems even if I don't trust you, it's justified. After my sarcastic words, I threw the divorce papers I had prepared at Gabriel. His face gradually showed despair, with an undercurrent of madness. Honey, what are you doing? He stuttered, fear evident in his voice. Mr. Gu, surely you're not illiterate. These are divorce papers, prepared especially for you. I've already signed my part, the rest is up to you. Before I could finish speaking, Gabriel, his face contorted, declared it impossible. Honey, I won't divorce you. Don't even think about it. The position of my wife will always be yours. I suddenly laughed mirthlessly. He still had the nerve to say such things. It was mine, but I no longer wanted it. Mr. Gu, you'd better save those words for your mistress standing next to you. She's carrying your child, scheming to take the position of Mrs. Gu. You'd better not let her lose heart and abort the child. I glanced at Isabella standing to the side. Judging by Gabriel's stance, without Isabella's help, it would be difficult for me to break free. That way, you'll never have a child. With that, I walked to the registration counter and stood in line. Gabriel's body shook, and he quickly looked at me, about to run over, but Isabella held him back. Oh, Gabriel, my stomach hurts so much. Don't leave me. He was flustered now, unable to pay attention to me anymore, and hurriedly supported Isabella. His heart was split in two. Even so, he still managed to ask me a question. Honey, what's wrong? Why are you registering? Are you feeling unwell somewhere? I know some specialists at the hospital. I'll contact them right away. I looked at him as if he were an idiot, also stopping him from contacting the doctor. Mr. Gu, surely you haven't forgotten that my knee is injured too. I came to the hospital this time to check on the wound. If you have the energy, you'd better pay more attention to your mistress who's carrying your child. Gabriel's face turned pale. He had been so preoccupied with Isabella these past few days. Only now did he remember that it had been 2 days since I injured my knee. He regretfully slapped himself, apologizing to me. Honey, I'm sorry. It's all my fault. Enough. I finally couldn't contain my anger anymore. Gabriel, stop calling me honey over and over. I've given you the divorce papers. If you know what's good for you, get a divorce immediately. Don't make me lose face and sue you for adultery in court, leaving you with nothing. A crowd quickly gathered in the hospital lobby. Everyone was discussing in hushed tones. Gabriel's thin lips were pressed into a straight line as he pleaded with me. Han, Lily, listen to my explanation. Let's go home and talk slowly. I can explain everything clearly. I forcefully suppressed the anger in my heart. If you want to explain here. Let everyone judge whether there's any justification for cheating. This time, Gabriel shut his mouth.